Hello and welcome to episode 7 of season 2 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And of course, we're reading Jake Jackson's Myths and Legends, covering world mythology, and we are starting on the Chinese myths this time, of which there are 6 sections, so considerably more than the African and Celtic myths. And this time we're talking about the Chinese creation myths, which I thought were very, very interesting.
I was kind of hoping that that's the only section we're going to do because that's all I read.
Yes, we're only doing the creation myths.
It was a shorter section, so I thought, but I didn't want to read ahead.
Yes, that's fair. Yes, I figured you would not be reading ahead in this book.
I want to. No, I mean it's interesting, but I want to do the least amount of work possible.
Of course, as you do.
Hey.
So do you want to just
start? Do you want to start at the beginning?
Usually that's what we do.
Or do you want to start at the end and work your way forward?
What are you even talking about? I don't know if you're making a reference to something or if you're just saying things right now.
I'm just being absurd.
All right, that sounds.
It's been a long day.
Yeah, me too. And what better way to end the day than with the story of Pan Gu and the creation of the universe? At the beginning of time, the universe resembled a large egg within chaos and darkness. And over thousands of years, a creature grew within the egg, and this creature became the size of a giant, who named himself Pan Gu. Once he was fully grown, he stood up and stretched, which broke the egg into 2 even portions. And part of the egg floated delicately up and formed the sky, and the heavier part sank down and formed the earth's crusty surface. Pan Gu was very proud of this creation that he had made, and he became determined to keep the 2 elements separate. And the only way he thought to do this was to use his own mass, so he stood between them, holding them apart for 18,000 years.
Exactly, not a year less.
Yes, it was exactly 18,000, which I thought was an interesting number.
I wonder if it's different, if they have different numerology in the Chinese culture.
That's possible. Different holy numbers and that sort of thing, for sure. And so after these 18,000 years, the 2 halves solidified, and Pan Gu then laid down, having become very, very frail and weary over the years. He went into a heavy sleep that he never awoke from, and his body eventually became the world. His head was the mountain ranges, his blood the rivers and streams, his hairs the blossoms, his flesh the trees and soils, his left eye the sun, his right the moon, his breaths became the winds and clouds, his voice became the thunder and lightning, and his sweat and tears became the rain and the dew. And that is the story of how the entire universe was created.
And do you think, and you know mythology, of course, better than I do, are all the creation stories going to have essentially a struggle between order and chaos?
I think so. For the most part, that's usually how it is. And, this actually motif of like a giant dying and forming the land isn't just, solely for Chinese myths. I think it's sort of the same thing in Norse mythology. It's been a while since I've read it. But I think it's the same case with Ymir the giant, who lays down and becomes essentially the same thing, with his body being the mountains and blood, the streams, and that sort of thing. So it's interesting that, these 2 cultures, which are entirely separate, basically, kind of came to the same sort of idea that the entire world is made up of the body of one giant, essentially.
What do you think that is?
I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I guess you can kind of see it as like, these early cultures would definitely have seen more bodies than we would today. And so I think, kind of over time, they'd see the body kind of decomposing and becoming one with the earth. And so they'd kind of think, well, I mean, if that kind of happens to our bodies, surely that must have happened to form the first earth, I guess, essentially, which I think, is a plausible explanation. I'm no expert, but I think that could be something that happened.
Yeah. I was thinking that it seems like it's somewhat universal in ancient times to personify the natural world as if it is a being itself, like here, this is a body, and then, the rivers are the bloodstream and that kind of stuff. But the similarities are pretty interesting. And then I like the line in the description that when Pan Gu observed the world that he was creating, he was happy and proud to have created some light in a place of darkness. Kind of remind me of, the Old Testament, after each day and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And this is probably something I should have mentioned before I started reading these, but in the introduction, Jake Jackson kind of breaks down, really how Chinese mythology came to be. It's one of the oldest mythologies, we think, because China's one of the oldest cultures, but kind of like the blend of things that kind of did come into China, which is a relatively isolated nation for most of its life. But, you do have the Buddhist influences, and you kind of have the Taoism and that sort of thing. And so what he kind of says in this introduction is, these Chinese myths, either they kind of originally had this idea of chaos versus order and that sort of balance, or that was kind of introduced into them and became a major part. But whatever the case is we definitely do see order and chaos just being two central themes throughout all of Chinese mythology. So that's something to also look out for. And I think, that's first seen in the creation myth first.
Yeah, I guess that yin and yang stuff. Is that Chinese, or that's not Japanese, is it? That's Chinese. Yin and yang?
You are asking the wrong person. I wish I knew. I should know, but I think it's Chinese.
Yes.
I feel terrible if that's just completely wrong.
We will have offended our listener.
Yes, our single listener. Lost the Chinese person. Dang it.
I wonder if next season, if we have another season, if we should do world religions.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, because neither one of us are... I think it's something we'd both be interested in learning, and there'd be an excuse to read about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the next story is about how Nuwa peopled the earth. So after Pangu died, gods, goddesses, and giants sprang forth from his body, and one of them was particularly powerful. And this goddess was named Nuwa, and her partner was Fuzi. Nuwa was the strangest in appearance, as the lower half of her body was a snake, and the upper half took the form of a woman. And she
wasn't there a Greek? I don't know if it was a god. Was there a Greek character that had like snake legs or something?
I know Medusa with the snake hair. I don't know about snake legs.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
All right. It might be an Egyptian god, too, because they're known for having, like, half animal, half human. That could be a thing.
I thought I saw it in the Percy Jackson movie.
You might have. That's just the most accurate source of mythology.
Well, take your information where you find it.
That's very fair. And so Nuwa had the ability to change her appearance up to 70 times a day. And so as she kind of roamed about the world, she felt it to be too silent and empty, and so she sat down on the banks of the Yellow River and began to imagine herself spending time with animated creatures with thoughts and feelings. And while she was kind of imagining these creatures, she absent-mindedly stuck her hands into the river clay and began molding the clay into figures. And these figures were made in her image, but with actual legs instead of a snake body. And to her surprise, once she formed these creatures, they came to life and rejoiced. So she made many more of these beings, but after a time, she grew tired, and so she thought of a different way to start creating more of these beings more easily. So she got a stick, and she coated it with mud and began to fling it. And as she flung it, mud would drop off, and wherever the mud hit the ground, a new being appeared. And so Nuwa then decided that the ones that she shaped with her hands would be the rich and the fortunate of the world, while the ones that she created out of the mud drops would be the poor and less fortunate. And so she separated them into sons and daughters and bid them multiply. And that is how the earth was peopled. Did you find your snake goddess?
No, it wasn't a goddess. I thought it was like just a creature or type of creatures, but I can't remember what the heck it was. But it's like another story of creating people out of mud and clay or whatever. Mm-hmm. Do you think?
Yes. What do you think about sort of the difference between like the rich and the poor with, actually crafting them and then just flinging them with the mud drops?
It sounds like a myth that the rich people came up with to explain why they're rich and why the poor people should just be happy about it.
Yep. I think that's actually kind of mentioned in here is that, the rich always trace their lineage back to these properly formed beings and that sort of thing. So it's a kind of a sly way to say, I'm better than you. I should have this money because I was made better.
Yeah, I'm sorry. God gave it to me, so what am I supposed to do with it?
Exactly. Just an unfortunate thing that happens in many, many cultures. What else?
I mean, you gotta justify it somehow.
Yes, that's true. I also think it's interesting, kind of the idea of creating them in her own image and then, commanding them to multiply, which, we kind of always bring this back to the Old Testament, but, that's very similar sort of echoes of those sort of themes that we see in the Old Testament in Genesis.
Yep.
Which is very, very interesting.
Yep. There's a lot of commonalities and of course it begs the question, is it because there's always some accurate theme, or is it something that we're naturally inclined to believe, or what's the third option? I don't know.
I don't know. You were the one talking about it.
Well, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yes.
So what it could be accurate, that there's a sense that we've been created in the creator's image,
Mm-hmm.
or that we have some sort of compulsion to believe that we're, and it's not true,
Mm-hmm.
that we are created in the creator's image.
Yeah. I don't know.
Something that sets us apart from all the other beings, maybe.
Yeah. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg, Are we separate from other beings by design, or are we, just by chance separate from other beings and then have to think of a rationale for that, basically?
Right. Or we're not really that different from them.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to believe that we are.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting question, and I guess just about every culture in the world has tried to answer it, which is very, very interesting, because I think, at least every culture in the world does recognize the difference between humans and animals, essentially.
Right.
As far as I know, off the top of my head, I can't think of one that doesn't, but, it's an interesting dichotomy there.
Yeah, well, they don't murder each other like we do.
Yeah.
You don't see widespread killing for no good reason in the animal kingdoms. I mean, you see them kill. There's not a whole lot of killing for sport in the animal kingdom.
Yeah. I was going to go with a more positive note. We have, the intellect and the, greater capacity for thought and language and those sorts of things. But yeah, the killing does work too.
Well, we seem to have a greater capacity for evil.
Yes, that's true. But we also have a greater capacity for good.
I don't know. I mean, not in the same level. I think we have a much greater capacity for evil compared to animals.
I mean, I just think animals are kind of neutral. I mean, they can't really judge their actions for the most part, so they don't really have any concept of good or evil.
Well, I'm not saying that necessarily they have a concept of it, but in the ultimately, whether their conduct is good or bad or neutral, I think we have a much bigger capacity to be bad than animals even have the capacity. But I think animals can do good things.
Yeah. I guess what you're saying is we have a much easier time of doing evil actions.
Not about easier time. We're just more predisposed to do it. We're more effective at it.
Yeah.
It's that much easier to round up millions of people and kill them.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot of organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are we doing that much? I mean, I think that I don't know, man. I'm just being pessimistic today. I'm in a bad mood.
I can tell.
So, I mean, but when you really think of it, is there more goodness, good acts in the world, like really superlative good acts, or more really horrible acts? You know what? I made the mistake of reading a news story about the Travis Scott concert. I don't even know who this was. And of course, he's got all sorts of like demonic imagery, and all that kind of stuff. And all these people are suffocating and dying at his concert. And he's just like, he's up there on stage just singing. And there's like a video of him like looking down on this gal. She's probably dead. And he's just like, I think he'd call it singing, whatever he does.
Yeah. Pretty
disturbing stuff. And I probably should not have watched that immediately before starting this podcast.
Probably not. I think that puts you in a bad mood, that's terrible. It's a really just awful scenario, really awful situation. I feel terrible for everybody involved. Yeah, it's very, very depressing, I guess.
Right.
Really.
Well, yeah. Anyway, so I digress. I need to get off that subject.
Yes.
I'm just thinking. I kind of went way off on a tangent about our capacity for good or evil, and when you really think about all I guess I would say the large scale or industrial evil, we have a huge capacity for that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Well, I guess I guess we do have a large scale capacity for good, because if you look at like all the civic organizations around, especially in the United States. Like Rotary and Kiwanis and the Optimists and all, and the Elks, and people get together. There is still, I guess, day in and day out. Let me convince myself I was wrong earlier. Day in and day out, there is more capacity for organized goodness than organized evil.
Yes.
Because evil tends to be a one-off. It's pretty rare to have a systemic organized evil.
Mm-hmm.
Although when you look through world history, slavery was almost universal in every society.
Mm-hmm.
I'm convincing myself of the opposite.
Yes.
I could argue with myself all night on this.
I'm sure you could. Yeah.
We should talk about the war between the gods of fire and water.
Sure. So
all the end of the story, you know what the end of the story is?
What?
Steam.
It's just awful. It's a terrible joke. Oh my God. So the story of the war between the gods of fire and water. For many years, Nuwa protected her creation of people from all harm and evil. However, two gods, Gonggong, the god of water, and Zhurang, the god of fire, got entangled into a terrible fight.
I should have named you Gonggong.
Yeah, Gonggong, Finn McCool, Bishop.
Not Finn McCool anymore. You're Gonggong.
Gonggong. Thank you, Dad. I appreciate it. So, after 4 days of fighting, Zhurang got the upper hand and cast Gonggong out of the heavens. So as he fell down to the earth, he became aware of his shame at his defeat and became resolved to kill himself. And seeing a tall mountain range in the distance, he ran full speed at it, ramming his head against it. A great noise sounded out when he impacted the mountain, and Gonggong saw that a great chunk of the mountain had broken away, leaving a gaping hole in the sky. The sky then began to collapse, causing great crevices to appear as sky chunks crashed down. Some of these crevices released burning flames, while others spewed forth streams of filthy water, creating an ocean and terrible floods, and all of the people of the world cried out for help. Nuwa saw only one way to fix this, with her own hands, and that leads us into the next story, but let's first talk about the war between the gods of fire and water. It's another clear dichotomy here, which is interesting. Usually in other mythologies, as far as I'm aware, you don't really see, the god of water really being, it's sort of antagonist as he kind of is in this story. Typically, They tend to be neutral unless provoked, really, which I guess is kind of the nature of the sea. It can kill you if it really wants to. But it's interesting that he's kind of the antagonist here and, causes all this destruction because of his shame, which I thought was very fascinating.
I was most curious about the fact that he had red hair.
Yes, he did have red hair. That's a detail I didn't mention, which is very, very strange.
And I guess, do they have red-headed people in China?
I mean, I guess they would have at some point to even know that it was a possibility. But yeah, it's a very, very small chance of, I guess, a red hair mutation happening in China.
Well, I guess maybe it's the same as how we can have blue-haired weirdos in the United States now, when that's not in the natural world.
Yes, I guess that's possible. But it is interesting. There were, this is kind of a linguistic discussion, but there was an Indo-European language in China for a while. And, the Indo-European languages are those of India and Europe, of course. And by and large, the Chinese languages are entirely separate from Indo-European languages. And the reason we know this is that there were, ruins within China somewhere. I think they dated to the 12th century, if I remember correctly. And I think they did depict, it was like an image of people with red hair and then some, writing underneath of it. So, there were at least some population of Indo-European people within China.
Huh. So the 12th century AD.
AD, I believe so. I could be wrong on that date. It was sometime in that rough period. I'm not entirely sure.
Well, there was trade through China for centuries and centuries. But yeah, their culture seemed to have been pretty isolated.
Mm-hmm. They tend to be very, very isolated throughout history, with the exception of the Silk Road was kind of their big opening up into the world with that massive trade.
So I forgot to mention that I studied for this podcast even before doing the reading.
Did you? Did you look up hurling?
No, no, because I'm studying Chinese culture. So really? Your youngest brother Eli and I watched the movie Shanghai Nights last night, starring Jackie Chan and Owen Wilson.
Oh. How was that?
It was pretty awful. Although there was one character that was they went to England, hence the Knights with a K. Mm-hmm. A very convoluted plot. More holes in the plot than plot. But anyway, it had one of the best lines I've heard in a long time, where this little street urchin was stealing things from Owen Wilson and stuff. And Owen Wilson just looks at him and says, of course, the kid's an orphan. He says, "You know what? Nobody likes you. You don't have any parents. You're just an orphan."
That's just awful.
And it was so bad. It was funny. And you know how Jackie Chan movies always have outtakes at the end. There's like a few outtakes of Owen Wilson just trying to deliver that line deadpan. It's like, man, that's just awful. Anyway, so I learned a lot about Chinese culture from the Jackie Chan movie.
I can imagine. This is completely unrelated. I guess related.
Shanghai Nights.
Yeah, in some fashion. But have you ever seen, what's the movie called? Jack Black, where he's a Mexican wrestler?
Oh, Nacho Libre or something?
Nacho Libre.
Nacho Libre?
Nacho, it's Nacho, yeah.
Nacho, I've never seen it.
You've never seen it? Well, there's a great scene where the two main characters, Jack Black and his, like, I think it's like this basically urchin boy as well, who he partners up with to go, wrestling essentially. And Jack Black is a brother at a Catholic orphanage. And so their big conflict towards the end of the movie is, I think they're both putting on very bad fake Spanish accents. And so the urchin boy looks at him and goes, "I hate all the orphans in the world." And that's their big split. And it's just amazing. It's a great scene.
Well, I'll have to check that out.
Yes, it's great. It's a good movie.
Have you ever seen the movie that you're living in now on campus, Idiocracy? Have you seen that movie?
We watched it together.
Oh, okay, good. All right. I wanted to make sure I was bringing you up right. I did not miss that.
Yes, we definitely watched that together.
Owen Wilson's brother, whatever his name is, Wilson.
I didn't even know he had a brother.
Yeah, he's the guy that's the main character.
Huh. I did not know that.
He's also in Old School. I always forget his first name. It's not Pete Wilson. He's a former governor of California.
Probably not him.
It's not him. By the way, do you know Gavin Newsom's missing?
I have heard about that.
He's not been seen in public for 11 days. 11 days ago, he got the second Moderna shot. The rumor is, do you want to hear the rumor?
Sure.
Should I say this on my podcast? Maybe we'll get banned. that he developed Bell's palsy.
Really?
Yeah, like where your part of your face is paralyzed and stuff temporarily.
Huh. That's very unfortunate.
I don't know. I think the entertainment value of seeing him in public with Bell's palsy because he got the second shot that he's trying to force everybody to get seems to be more poetic justice than bad. But yeah, is that a bad thing to say?
That might be a little unfortunate.
I need to go to confession.
Bringing it back to the story, just one more thing I wanted to mention about that is, again, we have a flood story, which is going to keep popping up over and over again. This is the big cataclysm when, all the people cry out for help is because their whole world's being flooded and burned, essentially. Yeah. That's just another connection there.
Steam.
Yes, steam. Good.
Fog.
And then we move on to the last story in this section. Nu-Wa repairs the sky. So Nu-Wa, then seeing this great gap in the sky, gathered the materials that she needed. She gathered pebbles from the river Yangtze, which she then melted into paste in a heavenly forge. And so she filled in the big hole in the sky with this big glob of paste. She then burned some river reeds and filled all of the crevices in the earth with ash. She then took a giant immortal tortoise because, she wasn't sure if this had fully repaired everything. But she took this tortoise, chopped off its legs, and placed one of the legs in each of the cardinal directions as supports for the heavens so that they would never fall down again. She then came down to her people, and she took 13 sticks of bamboo and fashioned a flute out of them. And the music it made calmed down all of her people who were understandably panicking after this great cataclysm. And so after this, they named her the goddess of music, among many other titles. However, the earth was never the same. The sky tilted permanently to the northwest, and the sun and the moon tilted west, and all rivers now flowed east. And after playing on this flute for her people, Nu-Wa then died, as she had been very old at this time, and her body became 1,000 fairies who watch over humans on her behalf. And that is it for the creation stories of Chinese mythology as told in this book. So what do you think about that last story?
Fair number of tortoises and turtles and stuff in these kind of ancient texts.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I mean, it seems more of a straightforward explanation of the flow of river water in China and that kind of stuff. The fairies were an interesting element I didn't anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
And almost like a guardian angel type theory, or angels from heaven. But these guys would be the fairies.
Yeah.
But
I did
not
think it was
from heaven, I guess.
I did think it was interesting, kind of like the point about how like the sky was tilted almost, because I think that's kind of like how you'd like look up at the Milky Way, because we're not like perfectly perpendicular with the Milky Way, I don't think. So if you do have astronomers over there looking up at the sky, it'd be weirdly off angle if you kind of believe that the Earth is the center of the universe, as basically every early civilization did. So it's kind of that's an explanation for that, which I thought was interesting, kind of paying attention to even the tilt, I guess, of the sky.
Yeah, I think they were known as great mathematicians and observer of constellations and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
The name was Luke Wilson, his brother, Luke Wilson.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. They have the same last name.
Yes.
I also think it's interesting, just kind of like the various...
Brothers, what did you think? Well, I guess it could have been like Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez. They're brothers as well.
Are they?
Yes.
Oh,
you didn't know that?
I did not know that.
Emilio Estevez of the Mighty Ducks.
Oh, gotcha.
And Charlie Sheen of Cocaine and Hookers.
Yes, of course.
Both sons of Martin Sheen, who was in Apocalypse Now, among other movies.
Wow. I was just going to say, I think it's kind of interesting, kind of like the shapes and like animals that are kind of used to represent the universe as a whole. We kind of go from the single egg, which I guess would make sense, kind of looking up like at the the sky and the world as a circle, I guess, from your vision, right. And then also the form of a body, as like the mountains and valleys and that sort of thing, and then also kind of at the end, which I thought was interesting. I think this is a part of it, but kind of like as a tortoise, in a way, with the four legs supporting the whole of the world, and like the world would almost be the resemblance of a shell, I guess, on top of these four legs in the cardinal directions.
Right. Kind of like a story of Atlas with the sky. Isn't it the sky on his shoulders, that type of thing?
Yeah, that's what that first story reminded me of, with Pangu holding up the world, basically between himself to keep it from collapsing again into an egg. So yeah, it's definitely a parallel there.
Yeah. Pretty wild. There seems to be such a similarity in the various stories of the creation. It's certainly they all seem to have a separation from the earth and the sky, or the earth and the heavens, and how they are created and separate and separated by some sort of structure or being or something.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
So makes me wonder if I was not brought up with our history, if I would have come up with something similar. Yeah. If any of us would, not just me in particular. Seems like everybody across the world came up with skies up there and something came down here and separated and that kind of stuff.
It's also very easy for us to see dichotomies, I guess, chaos and order, and then sort of, fire and water again. It's kind of like a lot of these sort of conflicts take place in so many other mythologies that they just keep popping up again and again. Kind of like this, I don't know how to really describe it. I don't know like what the purpose of that would be for humans, but to just see like opposites as kind of central to a lot of the things that we write about is very, very interesting. I wonder what the kind of psychological thing is there.
Well, I've mentioned before, I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and a lot of his instruction or philosophy, or whatever you want to call it, is the struggle between order and chaos. That we have a natural propensity for chaos, and chaos upsets us, but the only way we can be happy and successful is if we can force order upon the chaos within ourselves and in our immediate surroundings. And I think that's universal.
Yeah.
I think it's universal for each individual, and I think it's universal for all societies or even smaller groups. You have to figure out the order from the chaos, because chaos is so dangerous and a threat to you physically and intellectually and emotionally.
It's interesting. This is somewhat different, but some of the discussion that we've talked about tonight has kind of reminded me of Tolkien's ideas of evils, to kind of bring it back to him. He kind of thought that there were really two types of evil, and this is kind of this is kind of personified in two of his characters, Sauron, who is the big bad in Lord of the Rings, and then Sauron's master, Morgoth, who is this vastly more like physically powerful being and that sort of thing, but he was entirely bent on destroying the world. He was purely like a chaotic evil whereas Sauron was bent on conquering the world. And he was very, very good at organizing things and organizing armies and getting people to believe him. And what Tolkien kind of believed was that the chaotic evil is always doomed to fail. It's always doomed to implode on itself. It can never fully sustain itself. But the organized evil, if you can convince people that you are the right way and that you know what is going to happen and you can organize all of these things, that evil is far more dangerous. Even if the chaotic evil is far more powerful, the organized evil can eventually succeed, essentially. The chaotic evil is doomed to fail, but the organized evil, if nobody stands up to stop it, will just absolutely succeed in every single way.
You're making a good argument. I'm starting to get inspired to be truly organized evil.
That's fantastic.
We can win, Adam. We can win. What's your plan? You know things I don't know, don't you? I'll follow you.
But yeah, again, it's that dichotomy in a different way. The order isn't necessarily good here, but it's still splitting it up, order and chaos. But how effective are those two methods at achieving what you want?
Never heard of the Morgoth thing.
Morgoth. Yeah, that's Silmarillion, the actual mythological text before the Lord of the Rings.
Is that something that I would ever be interested in reading? I mean, is it easy to read, or is it like work?
It's pretty difficult. You would not get through the first chapter.
Oh, a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
I don't know if I get past the title. I keep expecting it to be like some sort of lizard.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth reading if you're interested in Tolkien. But if you're kind of indifferent, I wouldn't suggest reading it because I don't think you'll get through it.
I think I'd be more interested in reading like his letters, like communication. I'm more interested in him as a person than like a deep dive into his writings. About his Hobbit or whatever the things are.
Yeah, The Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien is one of the few Tolkien books I don't have, but I'm hoping to get that pretty soon. Yeah.
I didn't know there was a book of the Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yep.
Who are they letters to? Is it like angry letters to the editor?
No.
I've often wanted, this is the book I should write. And I thought of this many, many years ago. Ignorant, stupid letters to editors and corporations and their responses. But somebody else did it years ago. I had the idea independently, I guess, but I never acted on it. But somebody published a book which was just ridiculous letters to corporations, like the PR representatives, and then there were stupid responses as if it was real. But that's a book I could write.
That is absolutely a book you could easily write. But yeah, the Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien are kind of interesting. Some of them are to his editors, of course. Some of them are just to fans, really. Because kind of towards the end of his life, he had so many people writing him, what is this elvish word? And, what are you planning on doing? Who's the real hero? And that sort of thing. He actually wrote a letter to Frank Herbert, the author of Dune, because I think he sent him a copy of his book. Tolkien didn't like it, but he also didn't dislike it. It's kind of like, it's kind of long.
Have you, from Tolkien?
Yeah.
Have you ever read Dune?
I have not. I saw the movie, though, actually, this weekend.
Oh, the new one, did you?
With some friends, yeah. It was really good.
Yeah. I heard it ends abruptly.
Well, apparently it's only the first half of the first book, of which there are 6.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's like a 2 trilogies.
Yes, I guess so.
Much like the Lord of the Rings is 1 trilogy.
I guess so. I guess there's technically 6 books in Lord of the Rings.
Is that right?
Yeah, each book is split up into 2. Tolkien wanted to publish them all at once as one big book, but the editors did not like that.
Yeah, I think they made the right call on that.
He also wanted to publish the Silmarillion with them as one big saga of the jewels and the rings, as he put it, which would have been neat to see. But unfortunately, the Silmarillion wasn't even published until after his death. And he never really technically completed it because he was such a perfectionist. He just kept going back and reworking things because he wasn't ever really happy with it. So his son kind of had to put together his most recent stuff. And he kind of realized, throughout his life that there were still things that he had, not seen before. And so those were published in all kinds of other books and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of Tolkien stuff out there. And I have read the majority of it.
I believe you. I'm surprised you don't have one of his books. Well, maybe a Christmas present.
One of whose books?
Tolkien's. The Book of Letters.
Oh, yeah. There's a couple I don't have, but yes. Yes. All right. Do you have any other thoughts about Chinese mythology and the creation myths?
No. They're neat stories, and I look forward to learning more about it. It's a really neat culture that was nearly destroyed by the communists. They tried to wipe it out.
Yeah.
And maybe they have wiped out a lot of it. I don't know. I don't know the Chinese culture very well.
This is also kind of going more into, I think, what we were hoping for, I guess, in the Celtic mythology, with more stories of gods and that sort of thing, rather than the heroic sagas and that sort of stuff. So it's neat to get back to like a pantheon and creation myths and that sort of thing. So I'm looking forward to the rest of the stories, of which there are 5 more sections.
Nice. Good.
Yes.
That'll be fun.
Yes. All right.
That way we can impress our future Chinese overlords with stories of their myths and legends from ancient times.
Exactly. That's the plan. All right. Well, I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
And you have been listening to Unlimited Opinions. You can still follow us on Twitter, capital U, lowercase LMTD, then opinions with a capital O.
Has anybody commented yet?
Nobody has commented. We did get a follower who has retweeted a couple of our things, who I think also has a podcast himself.
Oh, loser.
I should don't say that. They follow us. They're going to listen to this.
Oh, no. You know...
Oh, no. Somebody's going to listen.
You know who you should tweet this at is... a guy called named Jack Fowler. So my favorite author and commentator modern day is Victor Davis Hanson. And he has a podcast. He has 3 episodes a week.
Wow.
And 2 of them he's basically interviewed or talking with Jack Fowler, who used to be the publisher of National Review before it went crazy because of Trump, and he doesn't work there anymore. But he's on Twitter, and I follow him on Twitter. I don't tweet anything to anybody, but he has very few responses. And if you could tweet at him and get a mention on their podcast, we would quadruple our audience overnight for sure.
Would not be hard to do, to be fair.
That's right, because even if 0.1% of their audience check this thing out, it would be a huge influx.
Yes.
But he's a fascinating character, and of course I think the world of Victor Davis Hanson. By the way, I sent Victor Davis. Did I ever tell you I sent him a letter?
I don't think so.
Asking him for advice about the best classics programs for incoming freshmen.
Well, by the way, this is still recording, so if you don't want this in the podcast, but okay.
Fine. No, he said responds.
Really?
Yeah, but it was like Ivy League bullshit.
Oh.
I'm like, we're not going to do that, because at that point Harvard they were all virtual, and because I was asking for like lesser known, smaller colleges off the beaten path, and I kind of actually his office called me, his assistant called me up from California.
Wow.
And I thought it was a crank call, so I was like instantly rude to whoever was on the other side until I realized, oh my God, this is somebody nice trying to help me out. And so
wow.
Mr. Hanson says you should go to, I forget what they were. It was Harvard. It was one of the other Ivies, but not Yale. I forget this.
Stanford, maybe?
I don't think he said Stanford, which is odd because that's where he's at. He's at the Hoover Institution within Stanford. But anyway.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So now you're in Kirksville.
Yes. I am in Kirksville.
But in defense of being in Kirksville, Victor Davis Hanson, who is known as an international authority on the classics, taught at Fresno State, which is a little state school in California, for many years, and formed a classics program there, created it, and administered it for many years before becoming a world-famous author and political commentator.
Interesting. So there's hope for me yet to get out of Kirksville.
You're going to do something big. It's just we just no way to know what it is yet.
Yeah, that's true. I guess that's where I'll leave this very long end cap bit after the outro music with that slightly uplifting message from you.
Slightly?
That was very uplifting.
It was complimentary, yes. And it's going to happen.
Yes.
Either that or they will destroy you, one or the other.
That's what I expected.